copy has been having for the last 3 years. This is an idea that somebody had during the pandemic and that has been now our motto, and is bringing education of quality and learning from each other. So in this series of webinars, we are very glad to have you with us. And of course, for those of you who are new to this series of webinars, let us introduce ASOCOPI. ASOCOPI, as you could see in the video, is the Asociación Colombiana de Profesores de Inglés. And we have our conference, our 58th and 4th international, 58 national and 4 international conference happening this year in Manizales, Colombia in October from the 12th to the 15th. So we will be very happy if you can join us. Now, my coworker, Katie Ramirez, is going to introduce our very special guest today.
Well, it's a pleasure for all of us have you here, Diego, with such an amazing presentation that we enrich our practice in the classroom. So, Diego, I don't know, like, welcome to our house as a copy.
Thank you.
It's an honor for us to have you here, and the scenario is all yours, Diego.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be sharing with my Colombian brothers and sisters. And today we're going to be talking about creativity in the world language classroom. The first thing that I maybe need to say is that for some of you might be familiar with this, but in the United States, we don't say foreign language instruction. We say world language instruction. It's just, you know, a play on words. It feels like when you say world language, you are involving more and you are being more welcoming to the rest of the world. That when you say foreign, it's something like different, like from far away, something that you don't connect with. And that's why it is preferred to say world language instruction in the United States. So allow me to start presenting here with you. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay. Adriana, can you please confirm if you see my screen?
Yes, Diego, perfect.
Thank you very much. And I will be really, really happy if everyone closes their microphones, so that way we don't have any interruptions. I will go ahead and give the presentation, and then we can leave some time for questions at the end of the webinar. Is that okay, Adriana? Yeah, I guess yes.
Absolutely. Okay. It is perfect. And people can start writing their questions maybe in the chat if you don't want to miss them, or so you don't forget them. And at the end of the webinar, we will have some time to solve.
Okay, so let's get started. So once again, my name is Diego Ojeda. I'm from Bogota, Colombia. I have been teaching Spanish as a second language in the United States for the last 23 years. And it's been quite an amazing experience, because I have had the opportunity not just to learn more about the American culture, but to dig a little bit more in depth in what it really means to teach a second language. So we don't talk about learning a second language. We talk about acquiring a second language. But that can be the topic of another webinar in the future. Today, we're going to talk about creativity in the world language classroom. Now, when we talk about creativity, sometimes we think that this is related to some kind of like crafty ability or some kind of artistic ability. So sometimes teachers tell me, Diego, the problem is that I have ideas, but I'm not that creative, thinking that creativity is only when you do something with your hands, when you start cutting papers and you make these beautiful paper productions for your students, and it's very artistic. But in the world language classroom, creativity goes beyond that artistic ability. It's not about that. It's not just about creating things with your hands. creativity in the world language classroom, as we're going to see during the webinar, is more about how we approach things in our instruction and how can we approach things from a different angle, not always from the angle that is presented by the textbook or the curriculum. So creativity also is related to change. Creativity is related to a new world. So when we are creative, we are changing things. Change is good. Change allows us to find ourselves as human beings and as teachers as well. So remember, to create is not necessary to draw or to cut paper. To be creative is not necessarily to have a Pinterest account. It's not necessarily to be 100% active on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and always be publishing reels or posts that people are going to be like, wow. You know, I mean, that's one type of creativity. The funny thing is that not always those who publish constantly something on social media that seems very appealing and interesting are the most creative in their own classes. And what we need to do is to try to be creative in our own classes for our own students. It doesn't make any sense to try to be creative just for our colleagues. So our colleagues can say, wow, Diego here is really creative. That doesn't help you in the classroom, okay? So let's get started. Here we go. Creativity in the world language classroom. After all of this, here we go. So the first thing, let's just agree on what creativity is. By definition, according to the dictionary, creativity is an ability or a facility to invent or create. So an ability to create something. And we can create in many ways. We are constantly creating with our mind, with our brain, and not necessarily when we are in the classroom. We're constantly creating in our daily life. We face situations that challenge us and that ask for some kind of creativity to solve those problems. And one of the things that you and I know, because we're teachers, is that we face a lot of challenges in the classroom. It can be discipline challenges, it can be teaching challenges, it can be any kind of challenge. That is why it's so important that we remember that we have the ability to create, to be creative in the classroom, and that way we can solve those problems right on the spot without having to think, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do here. I'm just gonna wait for the next ASOCOPY webinar. Maybe they will talk about that in a month, and then I'll fix the situation in my classroom. No, we need to be as creative as we are in real life. So that requires practice. We're teachers. Let's just say that we're not teachers. Let's just say that we are soccer players. That means that we practice every day, at least for 4 hours. And during that practice, we face different kinds of plays on the field. With practice, we kind of like start knowing what's going to happen next. And we start creating our own solutions. So that's why there's no soccer player that plays exactly the same. You see, Messi plays so different from Ronaldo, and Ronaldo plays so different from Linda Caicedo. Each one of them has their own way to solve those challenges on the field. We are those soccer players, but we're not playing soccer, we're teaching. We're not soccer players, we are teachers. But the classroom is our field, and we face situations every day that we need to fix. So how does creativity work? Okay, when we think about how does creativity work, we usually think that creativity is very related to intelligence. The problem is that we think that intelligence is what school has been taught us for years, that intelligence is some kind of like capacity that very special people has to memorize things, when in reality, we are all very intelligent and smart. There are multiple ways in which you can show how intelligent you are. So yes, I agree. It's related to intelligence, but not to that ideal intelligence, but to the intelligence that every person has, no matter what they do for living. Creativity is also related to motivation. Why? We're teachers. Teaching is not easy. Teaching is a tough profession, and we tend to lose our motivation with the years, year after year. I have been teaching for 34 years, and I will lie if I tell you that I have always been this motivated and energetic teacher, that I'm this full of energy teacher every day in the classroom. No, sometimes I lose my motivation, but somehow we need to regain that motivation before each one of the classes, because the more motivated you are, the more creative you are as well. I'm going to give you a real life example. Let's think about you as a parent. If you're a parent, you have son or a daughter, and just the love that you feel for that other person, for that human being, and that connection of being the parent makes you one of the most creative people in the world. You can be in a very tough situation. And this reminds me a former neighbor that I had in Colombia. The guy was in a very tough situation. He didn't have any money. He had his first daughter, and somehow that sparks motivation to keep going, and that sparks creativity, and he starts, doing better and better. So we need to remember that motivation is key and very important when we talk about creativity in the classroom. So somehow we need to find that motivation every day. Creativity also deals with attitude. If we are motivated, we have a nice attitude, and we can perform. We can be motivated, but might be that we don't have a nice attitude, and those two things collide and nothing happens. So the attitude is also very important. And also, how we deal with different situations. Okay, so creativity deals with how we perceive the world around us. Example, what if I'm trying to teach something and then two students are talking? How am I perceiving that in the classroom? As an interruption or as an opportunity for me to connect with the students and maybe connect what I'm trying to teach with that specific situation? Is in our hands. So the way we perceive what is going on around us is quite important in the world of creativity. Therefore, we need to be flexible. The creative person, the creative teacher, the creative soccer player is flexible. They just adapt. They know when they have to head the ball, or when they have to kick the ball with the left or the right, or when they have to allow the ball to pass behind them. That's the flexibility of the moment. Okay, so we have different perspectives. What kind of teachers will we like to be? So we want to be that teacher, the teacher who, takes into account all of these things, because that's the only way we're going to get to that creativity, to that moment where we feel like we are creating something different. So What do we look for in our world language classes? So what is our goal in our foreign language or world language classroom? Is it our goal to teach grammar? Is it our goal to ask our students memorize things and repeat like little parrots what we're saying? Is it our goal that the student acquires the language in their own way and therefore they start sharing about their own life with the tools that we have provided in the classroom? What do we look for in our world language classes? I'm telling you, maybe if we are just that teacher who is concerned about the students learning the grammar of the language, and we don't care as much about their personal life, about their world, maybe that goes a little bit against creativity, because you're always going to be searching and looking for books that will tell you the secret to how to teach grammar, and you don't get out of there. That somehow puts a block, and doesn't allow you, to be yourself, to be the creative teacher. So we need to think about teaching second languages from a different perspective. And this is only possible if we allow creativity to enter our classroom, to enter our instruction. Just sit down in front of the mirror and say after this webinar, I want to be a creative teacher. I want to be a creative teacher. I'm going to be a creative teacher. And I'm just not making this up, because I told you a few minutes before that I've been teaching for 34 years. And I do remember not being a creative teacher in my first maybe almost 15 years of teaching. I wasn't a creative teacher. I was just, making sure that I will comply with the curriculum, that I will just follow to the point everything that the teacher's guide will tell me to do in the classroom. I thought that that was to be a good teacher. I never thought about, hey, I can be myself. I can be creative. In other words, I can apply that specific intelligence that I have to my teaching. And that's going to make the class my class. I never thought about that. I never said in front of the mirror, I'm going to be a creative teacher. It was a process, but I'm telling you, if you want to be a creative teacher, you need to convince yourself that you can be a creative teacher. It's not going to be magical. It's not going to be fast. It's going to take time. It's going to take probably some mistakes, but you learn with the process. Okay? All right. So we need to devise new ways of understanding and perceiving the same reality. We talk about how we see the classroom. Why? Because not all of us perceive reality in the same way. So we must look for ways that are flexible and open, in which each student can find his or her own way of learning. Flexibility. When we are teaching a group of 30 students, a group of 40 students, we cannot pretend that each one of them is going to learn in one way. We need to be flexible. We need to adapt to the moment. We need to be creative. And I'm not saying that you have to come up with 40 different ways to teach, but the idea is that you need to make them feel that they are included, that you're not just teaching to the smart kids. The easiest way in teaching is to teach to the smart kids, those kids that are always like, yes, and smiling at you, yes. That's so easy. In a group of 30, 40 students, you probably have 5 of those. And then the rest are just slackers, they're just slackers. But these 5, I'm gonna focus on the good students. Be careful, because that is a trap. Don't fall into that. All of the students, every student is as valuable and can add to your teaching and to the community in the classroom. But we need to be flexible and make sure that we are involving all of them. Okay? All right, let's keep talking about perspective. A creative teacher is a teacher with good self-esteem, autonomous and self-confident. This is not easy because we sometimes don't have that good self-esteem because many things happen in our lives. Perhaps we're not well paid. Perhaps we have to teach too many classes in one day. Perhaps we teach in the morning and then we teach in the afternoon and then at night a couple of classes more. That really gets into our self-esteem and makes us lose a little bit of our confidence as teachers. But somehow we need to make sure that that self-esteem that we experienced when we were first year, second year teachers still prevails when you have been teaching 10, 15, 20, 25 years. Hey, I'm your teacher. I'm a good teacher, and I'm here because I can teach you, and you're going to learn from me. Always. It's easy to see sometimes the students a little bit older than they really are. And if you're a young teacher, that happens too. And that can affect our self-esteem. But remember, we are in this for a reason, and we need to keep that self-esteem in order to be creative. So creativity helps increase people's quality of life in any field. The more creative you are, the more options you have, the more solutions you encounter in any aspect or field in life. So isn't that what we want to convey to our students? That we are creative and that we can fix the situations presented in the classroom, and that we enjoy what we do, and that I feel good with myself, and that they can see that I'm happy with what I do every day. So a lot of psychology goes into this, but I cannot give you specific things about creativity in the world language classroom if we don't address those situations that are pretty much human and important. So some important considerations. Creativity is an act of initiative. It can be expressed in many ways. Initiative, when I tell you, get in front of the mirror and say, I'm going to be a creative teacher. I can be a creative teacher. Starting tomorrow, I will be one of the most creative teachers in the world. So it takes initiative. You can go to the psychologist for years, but if you don't tell it to yourself, it's not going to happen. So perfection and creativity do not go hand in hand. So sometimes we want to do things perfect, but it happens that when you're creative, you learn by making mistakes. So mistakes and perfection doesn't go hand in hand. It's not necessarily to aim exactly at a goal initially. We must let the creative process help us little by little to find the right path. So what am I going to change tomorrow in my instruction? Because remember, I said at the beginning, creativity is the same as change, and change is good. What is something that I'm going to change? Something little. Let's just say, I'm going to change the way I greet my students when they come to the classroom, if they come to the classroom. Sometimes you go to their classrooms, especially in Colombia, I think that you go to their classroom, right? Okay, so what is the first thing that you do when you have that first contact with your students? Let's just say that you're in your classroom and they come to your classroom. Where are you waiting for them? Are you busy writing something on the board? Are you on your desk finalizing the lesson plans? Or do you wait for them by the door? What can change? What can be different? And something that is not just different, but something that you think is going to help me improve the environment in the classroom. And it just can be something very little. See, it doesn't have to deal with curriculum. Let's just say, starting tomorrow, because I'm going to be a creative teacher, I'm just gonna wait for my students by the door, and I'm just gonna check their hands. Hey, good morning, good morning. They're gonna look at you like, what happened to this guy today? Doesn't matter. Good morning, good morning. That's a change. So important to keep that in mind. Creativity and vulnerability go hand in hand. So when I make mistakes, I cannot just feel like I'm the loser. I make a mistake, I need to understand that mistakes make me a better professional, a better human. I need to understand that creativity and vulnerability go hand in hand. So we must understand those mistakes as reminders of our goals. So we cannot allow mistakes to make us forget our goals. And that's something that I did in my first years. I was just absolutely sad because when I made mistakes in my instruction, I thought that I was the worst teacher in the world and that teaching wasn't for me. And that didn't help my self-esteem. But I didn't have all these considerations that we're talking about right now. Okay, what possible roadblocks can we find when we're trying to be creative in the world language classroom? First one, ourselves. In other words, if we feel insecure, if we don't feel like we are here because we love it and because we want it and because we can be the best we can. See? So it's important always to keep that in mind, not to be insecure. Sometimes we can see students as roadblocks in our instruction or on the possibility to be creative in the classroom because disruptions. So we need to learn how to deal with those disruptions. I think I have become more and more open to, let's say, for example, a little bit of noise in the classroom, just because life experiences. My daughter has Down syndrome and autism, and sometimes she screams. Sometimes she makes noises, and she's constantly playing with something. So I got used to noise, that kind of noise. So I have seen that after Sophia entered my world, I have changed in that aspect because in the past I used to be very upset about students making little noises. And when a student is like, let's say, open a candy, a wrapper, and they know that we're upset about them opening a wrapper, and we call their attention because of that, that's something that is not helping the environment in the class. So we cannot see any behavior, any attitude from the student as a roadblock, but as an opportunity. They need to see in our face that we're relaxed. I was observing the class of this Chinese teacher. She came from China to teach Chinese at the school where I was working at. And she was like a second-year teacher. And she was very concerned because she wanted the students to really learn Chinese. And she was probably concerned because I was observing the class. But her gesture, you know, her appearance, her face was like this. Oh. She was trying to be nice to the students, but the moment you do this, you're done. So we need to learn how to relax. We need to learn how to appear calm in front of our students. Sometimes parents are roadblocks just because they don't understand what's going on in the classroom. And sometimes our institutions, our schools do not help us making them and us understand that we're in the same team. So my recommendation is always make parents allies. Always don't be afraid of them. Contact them right away at the beginning of the year, somehow, email, send a note home. Hey, my name is, how are you? I'm going to be teaching English, and I know your students are going to learn a lot because I know this. See, make that contact so the first contact is not when a problem arises. So they are not those roadblocks that we think we have. Sometimes administration, they don't understand some of the things that we do in our classroom. Okay, so the temptation of what has already been done, of the proven, of the easy, of what does not require any preparation, deviates you from your creative objective and has a negative effect in the instruction, the class, and ultimately the students. So the temptation of doing what has been proven. And the thing is that most creative teachers are doing things that have never been done in other classes. In other words, they are not in a book or on a website, but somehow it's working. Why? Because each community of students, each learning community is a different community. It's different if I'm teaching at CNG or if I'm teaching at Rochester or if I'm teaching at Refus, San Carlos, or INEM. That's quite different. And the first step is to get to learn our audience and to make community from there. So let's just avoid the temptation of doing the same thing that everyone does, because that's the first roadblock to creativity, okay? There'll always be something or someone who wants to deviate you from your creative goals. Nobody wants us to think autonomously. So it always happens. It can be a colleague, it can be an administrator, but hey, the night before you said to the mirror, I'm going to be a creative teacher, no one is going to deviate me from that, okay? There is a saying I saw on Facebook that said, there is no educational system that prepares students to contradict it. See again, there is no educational system that prepares students to contradict it. Every educational system trains the students like little monkeys to do whatever they want. So be careful with that, because students are very smart. And with social media and the connections that they have now these days, they can see what's happening, that they can see what schooling is trying to do. But the good news is that they can also recognize when a teacher is creative and is different, and they work with that teacher, okay? All right, so limitations. We will not know our limits if we don't take the first step. What was the first step, people? Yes, in front of the mirror, I'm going to be a creative teacher. Tomorrow, I'm going to start being a creative teacher. I'm going to be the best creative teacher. And the first change is going to be this, little by little. But that thing somehow is going to start making you feel better. Because when you make one little change here, one little change there, one little change there, suddenly you see that what you have is your own piece of artwork at the end, because you change so many things that's your work of art. And how nice will that be? We will only know our limitations, and these are invisible to most humans. So let's not worry or be concerned about what other people will say about our teaching, about our instruction. What are you doing? Are you really saying hello to the students by the door instead of like getting ready on the board, writing what's gonna be the bell work or whatever? You're really doing that? I mean, people is going to criticize. People is going to put limitations on you, but the only people who sees their own limitations is you, not, don't worry about the others. It is important to recognize who has imposed the limits. So, who imposes the limits? It's quite important here. What happened? Uh-oh. Oh, no. Let me see. Give me 2 seconds. Something happened. This froze. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
it is moving again.
Okay, we're good. All right. So Who's imposing those limits? You, your family, your own schooling? Who's imposing those limits? The educational system, the society? I mean, everyone can impose a limit. The important thing is that we know that they exist and that we're willing to overcome them. It is important to recognize who has imposed those limits. Once you discover this, you will have taken the first step towards creativity, towards autonomy, towards loving yourself more as a teacher, and towards educational honesty and effectiveness. If we don't recognize this, it's going to be very difficult. Okay, now there's a group of people who I call the creativity deniers. So the first ones are the gray men, those that do not smile, the ones that do not enjoy, the ones that can't see the love and dedication behind your creative efforts. Don't be a gray man and don't be around gray men. If you feel that you are surrounded by gray men, people who doesn't celebrate your intention to do things differently, get away from them. And if you feel that you're becoming a gray man, get away from yourself and become a creative man. The pretentious ones, the ones who walk very close to you, pretending that they know everything. This type of people will not waste the opportunity to discredit your ideas, to make you look bad, to look over your shoulder, and even make fun of you in front of others. They live on your pain. This is reality. This happens, okay? So be careful with those who are always telling you, hey, great job, you're the best, because their intentions can be a little different. Or the experts, the ones who doesn't need to listen to other ones. They have everything figured out and they want just to make you feel like you don't know anything, that they are the experts. So get away from these three types of people, okay? The gray men, the pretentious ones, and the experts, because they can be a problem when we want to be ourselves and when we want to be creative. They make us feel guilty. Incentivizing creativity. There's nothing more exciting for a student than getting into a class where they do not know exactly what's going to happen each day. But what happens? It's so funny because what happens is that we get upset when the student asks, what are we doing today in class, Señor Ojeda? And we get upset, like, what do you mean? We're going to learn Spanish today. This is a Spanish class. We are not listening to what they are asking. So it's better to allow for some surprise in every class. This is not a math class. This is not a science class where you have to follow a specific order. This is a language class, and a language class is a class about life. And in life, we don't know what's going to happen the moment we get out on the street, okay? So let's not get upset when the students ask us, what are we going to be doing today in class? Because if you don't do the same thing over and over, and you don't follow the same pattern over and over, the student will stop asking you because they know that something different is going to happen in this class today. And that excites them. Creativity allows us to create learning spaces where surprise and wonder are the inspiration. That should be us with you. My apologies. So Caleb Gattegno said, learning happens when students' minds are in discovery mode. Learning happens when students' minds are in discovery mode. If we are doing the same thing class after class, there's no discovery mode. Discovery mode is when there's surprise, when there's something new. And the brain wants that. That's the way we learn. So let's read these tips when the foreign language class, with the foreign language class or world language class in mind. Number one, so these are kind of like concrete suggestions. Avoid routine. avoid routine. Let's not do exactly the same thing over and over. But I'm not saying, I start my class with something that is called a warm-up. It's also called bell work. But you can start every class with a warm-up, but just let's make that warm-up different. Okay, you can start every class with a conversation warm-up, but let's make those conversations different. Not always what did you do yesterday, just because we are practicing the predicate. Or what are you going to be doing after school today, just because we're going to be talking about the future. No, let's talk about different topics. So see, you have a structure and you have the warm-up, but you insert the differentiation in the type of little activities that you're doing during that time of the class. But avoid routine. Avoid always talking about the same things. Yes, to practice, but creative practice. So practice is not just repetition. Creative practice is when we allow the students to produce and to play and to make mistakes with the language. When we open the floor, let's use what we know. Let's try to express something about this topic. Let's talk about this. And they make mistakes, and you're not correcting those mistakes. Productive practice. Match those things you like with what you want to create and teach. In other words, we're talking about recognizing the teacher as a human being, recognizing the teacher as an important person, as part of the lesson. I'm part of the lesson. What do I like? I love soccer. And I love watching the Women's World Cup these days. And Linda Caicedo and the goalkeeper, I don't remember her name. And yesterday I watched the US playing against Netherlands. So I want to bring that to my instruction. I'm going to bring that to my class because that allows me to be more creative. See nuances in things. Not everything is black and white. So remember the students talking, the two students talking, interrupting the class. Okay, let's just see this in a different angle because not everything is black and white. Develop our observation capacity. In other words, let's just work with the spaces that we have in the classroom. We know that there's a leak on the roof in the classroom, the ceiling. So let's work with those things. Let's address those things. We know that there's a desk that make noises. Let's address those things. We know that we don't have markers, that we have to use something else. Let's just be open. Let's just use those situations, the reality in the classroom, to bring it to the instruction. Do not forget that everything is mixed. The specialization of knowledge is less and less important in the 21st century. In other words, let's not, again, repeat over and over and over what we have read in the books. Bring real life to the classroom because that mix is what makes it interesting and allows for creativity. Okay, we're almost done. So let's read these tips that I was sharing with you with the world language or foreign language class in mind. So read, research, join professional communities. And that's why I'm so excited about presenting this for Asocopy today. I'm very grateful with Adriana and the board for inviting me because to be honest with you, it's probably the second time that I address teachers in my own country. I'm used to give professional development here in the United States. But the fact that 47 people are connected on a Thursday at 6:46 my time, Eastern time in the United States, says a lot about each one of you, and I congratulate you for joining these professional communities. Do not marry to an idea or to an expert. Do not marry to Diego Ojeda. I'm already married, so sorry. Teacher meetings and groups generally do not stimulate or creative efforts. Generally, There are groups where creativity happens and where we support each other, but usually sometimes we take more time to come um, to, to say things that we don't like than to share things that we like and that are working in our instruction. So complain. We must overcome our mental model. So we need to make sure that we know that we're good at this. And if we're not that good right now, we're going to be better tomorrow and better the next day. And obey the flow theory. In other words, allow things to flow, allow things to happen. Overcome the fear to create, because in the end, we're not creative enough just because we fear making mistakes, because we fear, you know, being losers or something like that. We need to overcome that fear first. Okay? Some reflections to finish. Ribe, 1994 said, the relationship that exists between creative thinking and linguistic development in both the mother tongue and the foreign language. Use activities in which students believe and communicate gives way to the development of creative thinking of the students. In other words, I'm going to translate this because it's a little mixed there. But the more creative we are as teachers in the classroom, in the world language classroom, the more risks our students are willing to take, because they see that we, the teachers, are willing to take risks. One of the biggest risks that I have taken as a world language teacher was two things. The first one, when I told my students we're not using the textbook anymore, I put a bunch of textbooks in the garbage in front of them. They were like, huh? And the second, when I started serving them about how they felt in my classroom, if my instruction was effective, if they were learning, and I didn't ask for their names, and they gave me very open feedback. So when they see that you're taking risks, that you're being creative, they start being creative with the language as well, with the language that we're trying to teach them. De la Morena and Sanchez in 2002, the biggest problem is the lack of communication in English classrooms, where most of the oral production of the students occurs in quite artificial conditions due to the initial control that the teacher exercises. Yes, and this is another topic, and I have presented about this topic, about how honest we are as teachers. When everything that we bring to the classroom is artificial, everything is something that we need to believe in order to practice the second language. I remember my French classes in Colombia, you know, and I had to repeat, La voiture de Jean, c'est Jean. See, I have to believe that Jean had a car that was yellow. And I didn't see any character with that name. I didn't see any yellow car in my real world. So that's an issue. We need to bring real life to our classes. On the other hand, in a practice situation in freedom, the teacher can initiate the activity but does not intervene or direct it, does not correct the mistakes made by the students, and allows them to function autonomously and fluently. In other words, let's allow for mistakes. So the creative world language teacher, a creative world language teacher is someone who has their own style, is a person who never stops questioning things, looks for ways to improve his or her educational practice, and tries to go further. It also fosters an investigative spirit for its students and curiosity, respect their ideas, and educates them in responsibility and freedom of expression. It's funny, but we think that organized classrooms, that highly effective classrooms, are those classes where the students are quiet and they are obeying and following everything that we say. When in reality, the most vibrant classes are those classes where we allow the students to be themselves. Okay? And just to finish here, We talk a little bit about disruptive education. So what means to disrupt? Something that causes a decisive change. So to disrupt is not always negative, doesn't have a negative connotation. To disrupt is something that causes a decisive change. It's decisive, like important. So disruptive education advocates for a change in the predominant educational models in the world. And that's when I talk about Maria Caso, a teacher from Spain that proposes 5 keys to achieve disruptive education. The first one, accept that we teach is not what the students learn. We're saying something, the students are thinking about something else. We must try to get into their brain and their lives to be on the same level, on the same page. Change power dynamics. Inhabiting the classroom. In other words, make the classroom a place that you inhabit your home, and make the students feel that the classroom is your home, not just a space where you give a class. Go from simulation to experience. Remember, we talk about not being always bringing things that are artificial, but things that come from experience with real life. And stop evaluating constantly. Let's investigate. Unfortunately, evaluation is something that sometimes just stops the whole learning process. We give a quiz, we give a test, the student answers the quiz, the test, it gets a C, a B, or an A, and that's it, and we keep moving. If we're gonna use the evaluation as a starting point, that's different, but the way we have been using it is not working. So COVID-19, I was talking about COVID-19 this afternoon with my wife, because after we went to the store, she gave me a little bit of the hand sanitizer, and I was like using it, and I said to her, wasn't that crazy with COVID and everything that we had to do with COVID? The masks, cleaning the groceries, and not going out. But COVID-19 was more like an opportunity to see things from a different perspective. Okay, we talk about e-learning, which is another way, and then which we can approach education as well. And the most important thing about disruptive education is going from description to narration. In other words, we're going to make our classes a story. And the class from yesterday is connected to the class today, and today's class is connected to tomorrow's class. It cannot be just a different class with a different topic. Students now these days, they love narration as they love Netflix or movies, okay? So what does this imply in grammar, reading, speaking, writing, and listening? It must be relevant, interesting, repetitive, connected to the reality of the students. Any topic that you're gonna be working in the classroom. What do you remember best? Some life experience or details of a story you read? What do you remember best in life? Things that had meaning. So in our curriculum, let's consider the emotional intelligences. Let's remember that we learn in different ways. And let's make sure that we involve other subjects. Remember that our assessment needs to be motivating and formative, not just a way to see if the student is a C, a B, or an A. Learning by creation, by exploration, by playing, regulated, personalized collaboration between equals. So all of these things deal with creativity in the world language classroom. And remember, any type of language imposition is an act of violence. Starting with the sign in the classroom, aquí solo se habla español, only English here. That's an act of imposition, and it's an act of violence that we need to avoid. That's how the student sees it, okay? Classrooms must resemble those communities we hope for. We must bring democracy into our instruction. In other words, what kind of community do you want these students to be in 10, 20 years? Think about that. A community with democracy, a community where people can have an idea, an opinion, and they can express themselves, well, allow them to do that in the classroom. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. We must rescue the love for learning and the love for ourselves. Today's school is no more than just a simulation of education. We need to avoid that simulation of education. We need to make it real. What we teach is not what the students learn. Maria Acaso. What we teach is not what the students learn. From a classroom to a meeting space. So let's stop seeing the space as a classroom. Let's start seeing the classroom as a social space where language and second language happens. The classroom as a social place where students can talk to each other and can be themselves. From the descriptive to the narrative, like in the movies. From the contemplative to the experiential. The pedagogical act has no closure. It has many, many opportunities. And remember, we can never teach anything completely. That's the beauty of teaching. That is quite open. Okay. All right. I'm not gonna show you that because of time, but here's an example of just an activity that I do in the classroom. I didn't need a lot of preparation or to create a specific decoration for this activity. Just put a back of a grocery shopping bag in my head, and then I became this future wizard. So thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Thank you for listening about creativity in the world language classroom. And I'm going to share this presentation with the board. So if you would like to have access to it, you can take another look at a different time. So thank you very much.
And it's going to be available on YouTube. We usually upload them a couple of days after the presentation so everybody can have access. So make sure that you go to our YouTube channel. It's ASOCOPI. It's the name of our association. Let me write it in the chat for those of you who are new. ASOCOPI, Asociación Colombiana de Profesores de Inglés. You can follow us also in social media. Diego, I am so happy that you decided to take this opportunity. Well, this invitation more than an opportunity. It is for us a privilege to have you. We know of your experience. You're a very creative teacher. I follow you, you know. I'm one of your groupies. I follow everything you do. We have a common friend that is Martica Ramirez, that is now here also.
Martica. Hey, cheers, hola Marta.
Marta is also part of our association, a very important person in our academic community. And I am very happy that other teachers get to know you, because what you do is being an ambassador of the quality of Colombian teachers around the world. We know that you have been out for over 20 years and you're still teaching us, not only to English teachers, but world languages teachers. We know also that many teachers that are teaching Spanish as a foreign language or as a second language in the States are following you and getting in touch with you. Because for those of you who don't know, Diego is author of several books. You can also please follow him. He has this blog where you can find lots of materials and resources and ideas and inspiration. Basically, as Marta was saying, creativity is an ability that we can all develop. But sometimes we need to feel inspired, and sometimes we need other teachers and to follow other teachers and to know about other teachers that are making it possible. So thank you very much. And
you're very welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Very soon again in Colombia. Maybe you can come to our conference in October.
Thank you.
We are going to leave you with our presentation. Marta has shared the blog, the page, Diego's page in the chat. She has already shared it. And please, we are looking forward to see you. We wait for you in Manizales. We have many other activities. We have diploma courses. We have webinars the last Thursday of every month. Play it, Katie. Don't worry. Play it as I
I'm sorry. The thing is that I was trying to make it bigger, and it's just it started
It
playing.
runs. Yes, it's kind of, yeah, I know. Don't worry. But it's so people can see the information as I give it. It's okay. You can just play it.
Okay.
All right.
So we have our annual conference, we have diploma courses, we have our national and international keynote speakers. We offer diploma courses in academic writing, diploma courses in teaching English to youngsters, webinars for the EFL community on the last Thursday of each month, and many other activities. So please get connected, follow us in social media. We are looking forward to seeing you and to build community, this community that definitely goes beyond frontiers and barriers of language. And we are all educators, and we are very happy to have you here. So thanks for joining us today, and I hope I'll see you very, very soon.